She was screaming into the empty heat long before anyone heard her. Her voice cracked under the sun, like the desert itself was trying to swallow the sound before it could travel. Maggie Doyle hung twisted on a rough wooden frame in the middle of the Lincoln prairie, one leg hauled high by a merciless rope. Her dress was torn, fabric bunched and useless, her skin scraped raw by dust and splinters. She kept trying to tug the cloth down with her bound wrists, but every shallow breath only made the exposure worse. The pain was sharp and constant, but it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the fear that no one would ever see her as anything except a broken thing left behind for the vultures. She whispered for help even when she knew the desert had no mercy to give. Prescott's men had tied her there and ridden off laughing, saying the heat would make her confess before nightfall, but there was nothing to confess. Only the truth, and the terror that it would die with her if no one heard it. A shadow finally shifted on the horizon. A lone rider appeared, moving slow and careful, dust lifting behind the hooves. Maggie's heart stuttered. She prayed it wasn't one of Prescott's men coming back to finish what they'd started. When the horse stopped beside her, she lifted her head and met tired blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn cowboy hat. Jacob Hale didn't speak right away. He just stared, shock tightening his face as he took in the sight of her suspended in the burning wind. Then his gaze dropped without warning. His eyes fell to the place she wanted hidden more than anything on earth. Shame flared through her like fire. Her voice tore out of her throat. "Don't look there." Jacob snapped his head away, guilt flashing across his face, but he couldn't unsee it. He couldn't pretend the marks on her skin were anything but cruelty carved by a monster. Now there was only one question clawing at her chest. Would this man ride away like the others had? Or would he risk everything to save a woman he was never meant to see? Jacob didn't leave. Not after hearing her voice shake like that. Not after seeing the bruises climbing her legs and the burn mark. No person should ever carry. He stood there in the boiling wind, breathing slow, deciding what kind of man he was going to be today. Then he stepped closer, slow, careful. Maddie tried to twist away, but the ropes held firm. She squeezed her legs together on instinct and whispered again, softer now, "Don't look there." Jacob swallowed and lifted his hands slightly to show he wasn't a threat. He told her he wasn't there to stare. He was there because she looked like she was dying. His voice was gentle, rough with something that felt like shame. He circled the frame, studying the knots. When his fingers brushed the rope, he cursed under his breath. The knots were meant to cut, Prescott style. "All right," he muttered. Maggie flinched at the name. Jacob leaned in and spoke low. If Prescott did this, he meant to break more than bones. She shut her eyes as a tear slid down her cheek. When Jacob touched her ankle to check circulation, she jerked. "Easy," he said. "Just making sure you can feel it." She whispered that she could feel all of it, and wished she couldn't. When he looked up, their eyes met without fear between them. That single look told him everything. She wasn't guilty. She wasn't wicked. She was someone the world had tried to destroy quietly. Jacob took a breath and made a choice. The sound that followed changed everything. Hoofbeats, 2 riders fast, Prescott's men. The question slammed into Maggie's chest like ice. Would Jacob fight now that danger had a face, or would he save himself? Jacob heard them too, and every old instinct snapped awake. There was no time to think. Thinking got people killed. He stepped in close, so close she could feel the heat of him against her side. "Hold on," he said softly. Before she could ask to what, his knife flashed. The rope at her wrists fell away. Pain surged back as blood rushed through her arms. She bit down a cry, pride holding it back. He cut the rope at her raised leg and caught her as she sagged. For a heartbeat, her dress slipped again and she hissed. "Don't look there." He didn't. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her hips with quick, steady hands. The horses skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. Prescott's men grinned when they saw her on the ground. "Boss said leave her till sundown." One sneered. "What are you doing, Hale?" Jacob straightened, keeping Maggie behind him. His voice didn't shake. "I'm changing the schedule." The second man spat, eyes dull with drink. Thought you knew how to follow orders. Jacob smiled without humor. That's why I quit. The skinny one swung down, hand on his gun. Step away from the girl. Jacob moved first, but he wasn't young anymore. His fist cracked into the man's jaw. Pain shot up his arm. The man staggered but stayed upright, swinging back wild. Knuckles caught Jacob across the nose. Blood flowed at once. The second man went for his revolver. Jacob grabbed his wrist, but slower than he used to be. An elbow slammed into his ribs, right where an old war scar liked to wake up. White pain exploded. The gun fell, landing near Maggie's feet. On pure panic and something like stubborn pride, she grabbed it. She'd never fired a pistol before. She aimed skyward and pulled the trigger. The crack split the air. Both men froze. You want to try again? She shouted, voice shaking but loud. Next time I won't miss. Courage drained from them. They backed away, cursing, then rode off in dust and shame. Jacob wiped his nose and spat. Can you sit a horse? I'll fall off, she whispered. I'll catch you. He lifted her into the saddle, then mounted behind her, arm firm around her waist. The horse surged forward toward the distant hills. Wind tore at her face. The world tilted. Her fingers slipped from the mane, and her head fell back against his shoulder. Stay with me, he murmured. But darkness took her. The last thing she felt was the steady beat of his heart. By the time the hills rose like tired giants, Maggie was burning with fever. Her weight sagged against Jacob's chest, breath shallow and uneven. His old scar throbbed with every movement, but he ignored it like he always had. He guided the horse off the main trail into a narrow draw above the river, tucked beneath stone. That night, her fever raged. She shivered and burned, whispering about brands and numbers and boots on her throat. Jacob soaked a bandana in cold water and laid it across her face, her neck, the unmarked parts of her leg, moving slow until his fingers numbed. He gave her water a sip at a time. Once her hand clutched his shirt, and she whispered again, "Don't look there." "I'm not," he said. "I'm just keeping you here." By sunrise her breathing eased. The wild shine faded from her eyes. Her legs felt weak, but she felt the steadiness in him, the way he carried her like she wasn't a burden. He stepped back so she could pull his coat tight. "I need to look at that leg," he said quietly. "Not there, not for me, for you." He kept his gaze on her face while his hands worked. Only when she nodded did he look. The skin around the brand was swollen and bruised. Rope burns cut deep. He hissed, "That man should be in chains. He owns half of Lincoln," she said. "The law eats at his table." His jaw tightened. "Is that why? Because you saw too much?" She laughed thinly. "I saw stolen cattle. I told him the numbers didn't match. He said my eyes were the problem." Jacob cleaned the wound with war and cloth, torn from his own shirt. Every touch burned, but the care cooled something inside her. "You didn't have to come back," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said. "But if I ride away from that, I'm no better than him." They sat as the sky turned gold, bound by a secret carved into skin. She finally asked what he'd do when Prescott came. Run, or drat his sins into the light? Jacob watched the sky bleed orange. "When I was young," he said, "I wore blue and followed orders. I promised I wouldn't look away again." They didn't ride into Lincoln yet. He took her to a small ranch run by Cal Turner, a man who owed Jacob his life. Cal saw the brand and went cold. By evening, other men gathered, gray-templed, scarred, tired of bullies. They sent a telegram, hired a photographer. Mattie clenched her jaw and let the proof be taken. Days later they rode into town together. Prescott mocked them until Maggie stepped forward. Her hand shook. Her voice didn't. She showed the mark. The truth traveled farther than fear. By week's end, Prescott was led away in irons. Later, Maggie stood on Jacob's porch. "If you'd ridden away," she said, "I would have died, thinking I was nothing but that mark." Jacob shook his head. "You ain't the brand. You're the hand that holds the iron." And that was the question the story left behind. When they tell you not to look, do you turn away, or do you face the truth and stand?